Have you ever responded to someone in a way that you are not proud of? You know, when you respond to someone and then later you think about how you really would have liked to respond. Happens a lot, doesn't it? The good news is that we can get better at responding in all situations, especially those that are stressful or even intimidating. Today, we're going to talk about how pausing before reacting can be revolutionary in our personal and professional lives. Let's dive into the well.
Welcome to the EdYouWell podcast, a show created for, by, and with teachers. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chelsea. With over 30 years of combined teaching experience, our goal is to share insights and connect with fellow educators on how to thrive both personally and professionally.
Join us as we dive deep into the well of information, filled with meaningful discussions, practical tips, and ideas that go way beyond the classroom walls. Let's be well
and do well together. Okay, so today we are diving into the topic of pausing before reacting, something we experience probably daily in our work. So, Alex, let me ask you, did you have to do any pausing before reacting today at work?
Sorry about the pause. I just had to think about the question, so now I'm going to answer it. I had a little think time with my pause. I did. I had a situation whereby I was told something consequential. I was told something that held great weight from the person who was telling me. And I knew in that exact moment that the response that I gave could, I don't want to say make or break it, but could continue the conversation, end the conversation, could be something that person remembers for a really long time, attached to the impactful thing. And so I knew that my response and my words and my tone of voice, what I said and what I didn't say, it had to be well selected for the person receiving the message. So I really had to stop, listen so carefully, and then think. And that can be uncomfortable from time to time because people, I think, expect or find that dead space in conversation. It can be uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
But to me, there's more discomfort in saying the thing that you probably shouldn't say or not the exact right thing. So I did have that experience today, and I'm grateful that I have the confidence at this point to pause before I speak and to let there be silence in a room. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Yeah, I like that you said that you have the confidence to do that now because we mentioned this response pause ability idea in our last episode, which was teaching in your 40s. And I think that this is something that takes time to really learn, especially in our work. So I first learned about this idea of response ability when I read a book by Dr. Greg Wells, which was called, of course, Rest, Refocus, Recharge, because you know how I love to do all of those things. And it was sort of based on this quote by Viktor Frankl, who's an Austrian psychiatrist. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. And I think this is a beautiful thing to learn because no matter how you respond in any situation, there's always something to take from that. Whether you think, oh, I could have done better with that, or whether you think that was a good response and I'm going to do more of that.
And that quote is such a, I'm really thinking about this quote. There is that space in between, and that pause, that chunk of time is ultimately up to the speaker. No one can compel you or make you say or do anything. In that pause, you can extend the amount of time used in that pause if you need to. You have power in the pause, right? So if you don't know how to answer the question or what the next step is in that exact moment, then there are ways to get to the thinking time and the, putting it off a little bit so that you can get to a response that, honors the situation and is genuine to what you may or may not be willing to do. The amount of time allotted to the pause is key here.
Yes, that is something that we need to emphasize when we're talking about that pause. That pause is however long you need that pause to be. Could be a few minutes, could be an hour, could be a few days, in order for you to be able to really decide on how you actually want to respond. So, we're sort of breaking this episode down into 3 sections, and we're going to talk about when we're feeling those 3 types of almost like stress situations. So, fight, flight, and freeze. And this can happen to us in so many situations, especially at work. And it takes practice to manage your responses in all of these situations when you're feeling the fight, flight, or freeze response. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. These natural reactions we have, whether they're major or minor, but that we do experience at work and at home. So let's talk about fight first. And of course, we're not referring to, fighting. We're talking about putting your guard up and dealing with a situation, meaning that you want to face the situation. You want to take it on. Might be a conflict, might be a confrontation. So let's talk about the importance of that pause and how we can react when we're dealing with behavior with a student. Maybe you're getting an angry email from a parent who's questioning your teaching. Situations that are with real people that may cause you to want to sort of bite back.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Alex?
Keep your integrity intact. Like, that's number one, and the person's integrity intact. Because sometimes when people come at you, or maybe they're not even coming at you, it's just what they're bringing to you is not something that you like or want to hear. You want to make sure that if a person is not acting at their best, that you're not feeding it. And you want to make sure that no matter what the situation, because you can't control what you do, that you keep yourself and the way that you act intact. And the thing is when someone comes with you with something you don't like, or in a way that is not respectful, or you're witnessing something that's not respectful, you get all these like feelings and emotions, and you never want to react with emotions. And I mean, they exist and they're hard to they're hard to manage. So one thing in a pause, Chelsea, that I'm thinking about in this moment, because I'm visualizing situations, fake ones, but
Yep.
I'm just visualizing, is proximity. Like, sometimes you can walk away, right? Sometimes removing yourself from a situation whereby there is no good outcome in your response in that moment because the other person is not in a good space, you can remove yourself. That is one option. You can physically just move away. You can take a deep breath to kind of get yourself a little bit of time before you react. And we've said on this podcast, and this is from a friend of ours, but to kind of go with a very calm and confident approach to, I don't know, a little bit of self-talk, like time to stay calm, and almost speak to yourself in that. And I find that voice annoying that I just used. Keep calm. But to almost remind yourself of the type of voice that you should be using, not necessarily in the pause reaching the same level as the other person, like setting the pace almost. Those are tricks within the pause to kind of get your bearings back. Because I don't know about you, but when I see a situation that's upsetting, or a student is disrespectful, I have to get my bearings to be able to react in the way that you're, implying we should be reacting, which of course we should be reacting calmly to situations. So those stimulus to me are ones that elicit big feelings. And so that pause has been and will continue to be the key to successfully responding, or waiting to respond completely because the moment does not call for a moment, like a response in that moment. I don't know if I answered your question there, like, or if I am on the track that you're on in this. What do you think?
I like that you said you kind of have to talk to yourself. And even if it's, 30 seconds, the question that I'm always asking myself is, okay, how can I be my best self in this situation? And how do I want myself to handle this? Right? Like, I can see in my head how, it might be nice to handle it this way, but that's not going to work out for everybody in the situation, right? So it involves controlling those emotions, definitely, and then making sometimes a snap decision on how you want to handle that situation. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's be real here. We're teaching early adolescent kids. That can be very challenging. This is an age group that can test you, and they test their limits. That's how it is, right? So I've had a student walking down the hallway, this was years ago, and this student sort of yelled into the classroom, right? And I wanted to react because my class was disturbed, and I thought, how am I going to react? Because I don't know that student who walked by. So I sort of went out the door and I said, "Excuse me, can you come back here?" And the first thing I did was introduce myself. I said my name and I said, "Nice to meet you. You must be." And we exchanged names. And then I said, explained the situation and what happened and how that was disruptive, and, talked about it in a calm and confident manner. And the student was very receptive to that. And for the rest of the year, this student and I, even though I didn't teach this student, but we had a very cordial relationship and it was good. So if I would have went in and been like, what most of us would have wanted to do, don't do that again. That was rude, this and that. Instead of having the conversation, then maybe we wouldn't have had such a good relationship for the rest of the year, even though it started out like that.
So that's a beautiful pause. And reality is let's say that the same situation happened and it really upset you and you couldn't access calm, confident, calm. You just couldn't. And you went and you did you gave the student the harsh right off the hop. And let's say you damaged that, the potential, let's say, for there to be a relationship build. Many a times I've reacted with, let's say, emotion too quickly, not in the way that you dealt with that, which was beautiful, by the way, Chelsea. Like that was a
I was
nice
proud of myself.
situation. Yeah, you should be, because that to get to that space is challenging sometimes. But I also believe in the revisit, because you
Yes.
and I are both reflectors. Let's say you didn't react in that way and you did the angry reaction, and then you have the regret. You always have the option to call back that student and say, "Hey," because you do the pause later. Whoops, a
Yes.
little later. FYI, I'm so and so. I don't like the way that conversation happened. So I'm going to try again, and I want to say hello to you. And you reframe it in the way that you wished you had done it, and acknowledge that you didn't handle it exactly as you maybe would like to. And that also goes really far. So I had an experience the other day where I was on supervision and a student did something and it was a not okay situation. And I reacted strongly. And sometimes you have to react strongly to get students' attention. You have to use your voice, and it can't be, "Excuse me." It has to be
Yes.
firm. Okay. And that can be off putting to students. So regardless, that happened. And I knew that I had lost out with the student. I had to revisit. I did some mending. And then today I revisited again, and I sat down on a floor and we had a conversation, and the build was it's there. It's done. The foundation is laid. It's about making sure that if you don't do the pause and you do the reaction, that you are able to revisit that. And that is a hard thing to do, because in some capacity, you're saying, "I was wrong in the way that I reacted," without necessarily saying that exactly.
Mhm.
So you can pause later, and your response ability, it's also your responsibility to look at how you've responded.
Exactly.
Today, when I spoke to this individual, I saw such great interactions between this student with other students that I never would have seen if I hadn't been vulnerable enough to revisit and he hadn't been vulnerable enough to accept. So, I mean, we're pretty lucky to have these opportunities.
Yeah, and it's all about what you're doing is you're teaching that self-regulation, but you're modeling that self-regulation. And so when students see it, it will help them to display that with their own emotions, hopefully, right? That's the whole goal of this. And it de-escalates conflict that could be unnecessary. So there's a lot of good to this pause.
Yeah, and no teacher, or I mean, at least not this teacher, is walking through an entire day with as many interactions that I have throughout the day that I am not making errors or looking back and thinking, oh, I could have done it this way. I should have done it this way. I mean, this is a daily reflection. In something pops into your head and you're like, oh yeah, that wasn't good. Or, oh, I should have done this, should have done that. And that work kind of creeps into your head at home. And that's me anyways. So learning to give yourself that little piece of grace is really important. You don't want to be defeatist and think bad of yourself, but you have to also look for different ways.
Yes, it's always a learning situation. Okay, now let's move on to the flight reaction. So there are times when I would like to run away from all of my work because there are so many people who need my attention and my time and my energy, and I could say the same thing for being at home. And what I need is a minute. And I know you are getting what I'm saying, Alex. You need a minute. And these are times where you have to somehow find that pause. Even if it's in the middle of a loud room full of people who are all needing something, I will find some way to give myself a pause or give everyone in the room a nice pause, give myself a pep talk, figure out if I need to change direction in some way, and then pull it together and kind of go into decision making mode. So we're sort of talking about maybe overwhelm, which might make you want to flee or shut down. How do we get that pause in there?
I don't know, because the conundrum with this example, if we're speaking from the lens of classroom teacher here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when I picture flight, like I really do picture like complete removal of the space. Like, let's get out of here. Like walking into a space and realizing, oh, this isn't for me right now. I'm out of here. And you said your senses are in overdrive and you respond to that by getting away from it. Well, you don't have that option, Chelsea.
Yep.
That would be, you'd be in a little bit of trouble. And I remember the hallway always being a great friend of mine. And I would just kind of go into the hallway for a quick little minute. Of course, I had a way to look back into the classroom, so they were still supervised. However, you really can't get away. So in the classroom, how do you do that? I mean, you're asking me this question, and I think it takes incredible classroom management when you have the instinct to just get away from something or avoid it. I think when it comes to the space and the noise in the space, or something that's happening in the space that's bothering you, because the space is your responsibility and all the people in the space are your responsibility, it's not an option. So I think that is why so many people experience so much stress, is because one of the options instinctually that is there for them is it's not available to you. So other options creatively is being able to manage the class, take the instinct to constantly chat and quiet it down so that you change the dynamic of the room so it is no longer creating the need to flight out of it. And yeah, I that's in a classroom space beyond complex.
It is. And I think it does go back to the vulnerability thing. Like it's okay to be vulnerable. And I mean, if it's happening because the lesson didn't go right or you started some amazing thing and like group work especially, and it's just not going how you wanted it to go, to give yourself that grace and say, I need to shut this down and I do need to change direction. So you pretty much touched on, you need to change something in that moment, and that's okay. And being okay with that and settling things down and almost just organizing whatever might be going on in a way that's going to work for you in a calm manner so that you can better handle the situation.
And I might be speaking out of context on this with regard to flight, like trying to escape the situation, get away from the situation. But I think procrastination and avoidance are two ways that one might flight, like
Yes.
try to just get away from by not doing, by being in denial of the list, of the long to-do list, and finding new things to do just to get away from it. I think that is my biggest flight move that I do, is move towards things I'd rather be doing constantly. Um, that's a form of flight, I think, is avoidance and procrastination.
It is. And so you have to take that pause and, like I said, figure out what you need to do, right? It's just it has to be done sometimes instead of the avoidance, but I'm sure we are all experiencing that at some point, especially when report cards come up.
Well, it's the list, it's the sticky system, it's all the strategies that you have to employ to try to make those monotonous jobs that you may not, enjoy doing, to bring them to life, or to force yourself to do them. Yeah.
Okay, let's move into freeze. Now, I think we can have this freeze reaction with some of the situations that we've already discussed. But what about if there is a situation that is pretty upsetting and it kind of causes you to want to freeze, yet you do need to give some kind of reaction. And I know that that's a complicated question, but it does happen from time to time in our work. You know what I mean?
I mean, do you know what you mean? Hmm. I mean, that's why I'm glad we don't work in one-room schoolhouses, because we all have different strengths. And what might make you freeze might not make me freeze. I like to think that we're, all have our own stuff and our own strengths. I think that's why it's super important that we tap each other on the shoulder. And if we're in a freeze mode and there's something we cannot react to in a moment, or we don't have the words or the capacity, that there's someone else who does. And I also like to think that if it's a really big thing, we can just step up and unfreeze in that moment. And I'm going to tell you that I did in my career have a moment that came right unexpected out of left field. And I am someone who typically is able to deal with very dynamic situations and go to a very calm space. And then reaction happens later. But I can deal with the situation at hand. And in this one situation, and thank goodness there were no students around at all, I not only went into freeze mode, but I went into it was not a functioning mode at all. It was not good. And it took me aback, because I typically am able to handle situations. And I will say to you that I am grateful that in this one situation, I had people around me who were able to step up and react in a way that I couldn't in that moment. I think that's one of the biggest pressures about being a teacher, is you are in a room with students, and if something happens and you do get to you're in freeze mode, there's no one else necessarily stepping up and fixing the situation. So that is not a luxury that we genuinely have. So I swing back again, though, to having people who we know we can go to. And the other piece of that with freeze is, if you know that that is a tendency that you have to kind of be stunned and not be able to react, or there's something that really bothers you, if it happens that it's going to be something that you're going to have a hard time getting out with, making sure that you have friends and coworkers that know that and know that they might need to help you with that, and have a bit of a plan for yourself if something like that happens. And that's why support system is so important. And I'll repeat the fact that what causes you stress or causes you a freeze moment or a shock moment is going to be completely different than what it is for me. And that's just the reality of humanity, I guess.
Yeah. This is again where the pause strategy, it does come in very handy if you can access it in the freeze mode. So I have also been in the freeze mode at work, but fortunately I was able to look around at my surroundings and say, okay, what are you dealing with here? Can you ask for help at this time? And how are you going to decide to handle the situation? And, that's a lot of questions that happen in a span of 20 seconds, but it is helpful and it is calming and it does give you that moment to make a decision. And yeah, everybody has their own way of reacting, but if you can access that pause and ask yourself those questions and then decide how to proceed, it can be useful.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, when you were saying that, what popped into my head was saying to yourself, I'm going to have plenty of time to react to this and basically deconstruct it and debrief about it later. Right now is time for action and accessing that. I mean, we're having a very general conversation here, Chelsea, and while we're talking about it, I'm remembering many examples that I can't be specific about on the podcast that were really big incidents.
Yeah.
I'm remembering several examples in this discussion that were really serious. And, my reaction varied and other people's reactions varied. And I mean, the reality is when you're working in any space that has many people, and you're with that big group of people for 6-7 hours in a day, things are bound to happen. And when you're teaching for a really long time, you're going to know this. There's medical emergencies. There could be a fight that breaks out. There could be something really dramatic happening in someone's life, and they could have a really big emotional reaction. So sometimes as teachers, we do not have the luxury of being able to freeze. So that pause that you're talking about, if your reaction is freeze in one of those moments, it might have to move quickly to action. And so whether that's a few big, deep breaths, some really strong self-talk, or getting one of your people in the room who can help you right away, we just don't have the luxury of too much freeze.
You're always on. You're always on. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's Chelsea, like that goes back to self-care. Like you're always on. Well, when those pauses are strong and can get you to a better response. If you are taking care of yourself and you're living a very balanced life, your ability to access a good response or use a pause wisely is going to be maximized. If you are drained, if you are tired, if you are being torn in a million directions and you are not taking the time to yourself, your ability to do any of these responses, whether it's a response of freeze, fight, or flight, is diminished. And those are the moments, dare I say, where people make mistakes, where people don't react in a good way. And so that is why it is important to, take care of yourself, because you're faced with these types of things all the time.
That's the truth.
Of course, we're not psychologists. And interesting, the first time that I ever read about this was in a textbook, Chelsea, that we used with grade 7s, where it described fight, flight, freeze, and the body's reactions and then the amygdala. And it was some great learning for students about how their brain worked. There's one more word, though, and that is flop. And so we never have the luxury of doing the flop as teachers now, do we?
No.
Well, Chelsea, I just noticed that we have not yet made a well reference today.
We can't leave without making a well reference. What do you have for us?
Well, I just know our listeners love them so much. So let's grab our life preservers, throw them into the well. And I know we're treading water in that well, and the water's really deep, so we cannot stop treading water. And we're going to take that life preserver, and it's going to give us a
pause.
That's right. It gives us that moment of clarity, that moment of thought, a little bit of relaxed time, a little pause to think. What are we going to do next? What's the action plan, so that we don't go deeper into the well without the life preserver, because treading water can be tiring when you're in the classroom.
It certainly can. We're always trying to keep our heads above that water. All right, let's move into the takeaways. Number 1, use that pause if you can, and you get to decide how long that pause is. It could be a minute, it could be an hour, it could be a day.
2, inside that pause, do a little bit of self-talk. Take this question away with you. How do I want to be my best self in this situation? Give yourself that minute to envision yourself and go from there.
And 3, know that in whatever way you respond, you will grow from that response.
Thanks for listening to the EdYouWell podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a positive review. It helps others to find us.
Follow us on Instagram and Pinterest to help spread the word. For more inspiration, tips, and book recommendations, just head to the show notes and join the EdYouWell newsletter today. Until next time, be well
and do well.